The kingdom's skies turned dark as an unnatural wind swept through the land. The people felt it first, a chilling breeze that seemed to whisper ancient secrets. In the heart of the village, the elder Adebayo, revered as the last link to the ancestral spirits, collapsed. His final breath was marked by a strange tremor that shook the earth beneath them. With his passing, the silence that followed was deafening. The elders gathered, their faces clouded with fear. Oluwaseun, the young warrior of the village, stood at the center, bewildered. "What is this?" they asked, as whispers of a curse swept through the crowd. A deep, ominous voice echoed from the shadows. Ifenyi, the cousin and rising leader, stepped forward with a grin that hid his dark intentions. The raven spirit was real. It had awakened, and it was bound to the land, to their bloodline. As the people scattered in fear, Oluwaseun's heart pounded, knowing they had just learned of their fate, one woven through the very air they breathed, bound by an ancient curse that no one had dared to speak of for generations. The storm raged through the village, its force breaking branches and tearing thatched roofs from huts. The air was thick with an unsettling energy, and the villagers huddled together, whispering in fear. Oluwaseun stood still, their eyes fixed on Adebayo's lifeless body, their heart pounding with the realization of the curse that had just been unleashed. "This is no accident," they whispered to themselves, feeling the weight of destiny pressing on their shoulders. The elders gathered around, each one silent and grim. In the midst of the chaos, Ifenyi stepped forward once more. His eyes gleamed with anticipation, as if this was all part of a plan. "The curse has awakened," he said, his voice calm and authoritative. "And now you will all pay the price for the sins of your ancestors." His words hung in the air like poison, stirring an ancient fear that had long been forgotten. Oluwaseun turned toward the horizon, knowing they had no choice but to rise to the challenge. The weight of their bloodline, their heritage, and their kingdom's fate now rested on their shoulders. With the storm now calmed, the village returned to an uneasy silence. Oluwaseun made their way toward the elders, their heart heavy with questions that had no easy answers. "What is this curse?" they asked, their voice shaking with the weight of the unknown. "How can we break it?" The eldest of the group, Adebayo's closest friend, an elderly woman named Ifeoma, stepped forward. Her face was etched with years of wisdom and sorrow. "This curse has been in our bloodline for generations," she explained, her voice slow and heavy. "It is tied to a pact made long ago with a spirit, the raven spirit. The bloodline of the ruler was cursed for betraying it, and now the raven has come to claim its due." Her eyes locked onto Oluwaseun, a look of deep sorrow in them. "You are the one who can end it, but the cost will be greater than you can imagine." The weight of these words hung in the air as Oluwaseun tried to digest the enormity of their task. Their gaze fell to the ground, their heart filled with both fear and an undeniable sense of duty. As the night fell, Oluwaseun found themselves alone on the outskirts of the village, standing before the ancient oak tree that had long been a symbol of their bloodline. They had come here many times before, seeking guidance in their moments of doubt, but tonight felt different. Tonight, the weight of their ancestry pressed down upon them like never before. "What must I do?" they whispered into the wind, hoping for an answer. In the distance, the faint sound of drums echoed through the air. An ancient ritual was beginning, one that would test the strength of their spirit. Suddenly, a figure appeared before them, cloaked in shadows. It was Adebayo's spirit, his presence filling the air with a sense of calm and peace. "You must follow the path of the raven," the spirit spoke softly, his voice a gentle breeze. "Only then will you have the strength to break the chains of fate." The vision began to fade, leaving Oluwaseun standing alone, their resolve hardening like iron. The next morning, the village was quiet, too quiet. The storm had passed, but its effects lingered in the air. The villagers moved slowly, unsure of what the future held. Oluwaseun stood before the gathering of elders, their face set with determination. "I will do it," they declared, their voice steady and strong. "I will find the raven spirit and break the curse." The elders exchanged solemn looks, understanding the gravity of their words. Know this, Ifeoma said, stepping forward with a serious expression, the path will not be easy. The raven spirit will not give up its power willingly. And there will be sacrifices along the way. Oluwaseun nodded, knowing the truth of the elder's words. The weight of their bloodline, their kingdom's future, rested on their shoulders. They had no choice but to step into the unknown. With one last glance at the village they had always called home, Oluwaseun turned, walking toward their destiny. The winds of change carried whispers from the past as Oluwaseun stood at the edge of the village, gazing into the distant mountains where the raven spirit was said to reside. The elder's words echoed in their mind, heavy with the burden of an ancient prophecy. Your bloodline is cursed, they had said. The raven spirit, a powerful force bound to the earth, holds the key to your kingdom's fate. With each passing hour, Oluwaseun could feel the pull of their ancestors, guiding them to the sacred place where the raven spirit had been bound centuries ago. The air was thick with the weight of their responsibility. As they prepared to set off on this treacherous journey, Oluwaseun knew that the task ahead would not only challenge their strength, but their very understanding of who they were. The path was unknown, fraught with dangers both physical and spiritual. What is the true cost of breaking this curse? They wondered. With a deep breath, they tightened their grip on their spear and set off, knowing that the answers they sought lay far beyond the safety of their village. The path to the raven spirit's shrine was treacherous, a labyrinth of dense forests and jagged cliffs that seemed to guard the ancient secrets of the land. As Oluwaseun journeyed deeper, they encountered strange sights, ancient carvings on the stones, symbols they had never seen before, marking the sacred ground. The air grew colder, and the once familiar sounds of nature were replaced by an eerie silence, broken only by the distant sound of a raven's call. This is the land of the raven, Oluwaseun whispered, their voice barely audible. Each step seemed to draw them closer to something ancient and powerful. In the distance, the faint glow of a fire could be seen. As they approached, a figure emerged from the shadows. A woman with glowing eyes, draped in robes made of dark feathers. I have been waiting for you, Oluwaseun, she said, her voice a haunting melody that sent chills down their spine. The raven has chosen you. The woman, whose name was Zara, beckoned Oluwaseun closer. The raven has been waiting for someone with your bloodline, she said, her voice soft but laden with a power that seemed to pulse through the earth. She led them to a clearing where an ancient stone altar stood, covered in symbols and carvings. The air was thick with magic, and as Oluwaseun approached the altar, they felt a strange vibration in their chest, as if the very land itself was alive. This is where the curse was born, Zara continued. Your ancestors made a pact with the raven spirit, but betrayal has left the kingdom in darkness. Only by understanding your heritage can you hope to break this curse. Oluwaseun stepped forward, their hand resting on the cold stone. Images of their ancestors flashed before their eyes, each one bound by the same fate. The weight of the knowledge was overwhelming. The raven spirit's power was undeniable, but so too was the sacrifice required to set it free. Oluwaseun knelt before the altar, their fingers tracing the symbols etched into the stone. The images of their ancestors continued to flash before their eyes, each one connected to the raven spirit. The weight of their bloodline felt as though it was crushing them. This curse, Oluwaseun thought, is not just a punishment, it is a test. The raven spirit had not been wronged by a single ancestor, but by a lineage of rulers, all bound by a pact made long ago. You must face the raven, Zara said, interrupting their thoughts. But first you must face yourself. The curse can only be broken when you accept the truth of your bloodline. The words hit Oluwaseun like a wave, and for the first time, they wondered if they were truly ready to confront the weight of their heritage. The raven spirit was not just a force of nature, it was a mirror to their soul. They must understand it before they could break it. With the weight of the truth pressing upon them, Oluwaseun rose, their bodies stiff with the realization of the journey they had to undertake. I am ready, they whispered to Zara, though doubt still lingered in their heart. But where do I begin? Zara gestured to the path ahead, a narrow trail leading deeper into the forest toward a distant mountain peak. "The raven spirit resides at the highest point," she said. "But beware, for the path is fraught with danger. Only by facing the trials of your ancestors can you hope to find the spirit and break the curse." Oluwaseun nodded, their resolve strengthening with each word. As they turned to leave, the raven's call echoed through the forest, a reminder that the journey ahead would be one of transformation. The raven's spirit had chosen them, but the cost of breaking the chains of fate was still unclear. The journey through the forest had been long and arduous, but Oluwaseun could feel they were getting closer to their destination. The air had grown colder, and the path had narrowed, winding through dense underbrush that seemed to close in on them. It was here in the heart of this untamed wilderness that the raven's trials would begin. As they continued forward, the sound of footsteps behind them caught their attention. They turned to see Ifeanyi emerging from the shadows, his figure outlined by the dim light filtering through the trees. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes were filled with something darker than before. Ambition, perhaps, or something more sinister. "I knew you'd come this far," Ifeanyi said with a sly smile. "But you won't make it much further." The words echoed through the trees, unsettling and full of intent. "Why are you here?" Oluwaseun demanded, their grip tightening on their spear. "What do you want, Ifeanyi?" He took a step closer, his presence growing more imposing. "I want what's mine," he said, his voice low and menacing. "The throne, the power, and the raven's curse. All of it. And you're just a pawn in a game you don't understand." The realization struck Oluwaseun like a blow to the chest. Ifeanyi, their own blood, had betrayed them, not for the first time, but this time it was for something far greater than personal gain. "You would bring ruin to our people for power?" Oluwaseun asked, their voice barely a whisper, filled with disbelief. "If I must," Ifeanyi replied coldly. "The raven will favor the one who dares to seize what is rightfully theirs." Ifeanyi took another step forward, his boots crunching against the leaves. The cold air around them seemed to grow heavier, and the oppressive silence of the forest was shattered only by the distant call of a raven. "You never understood, did you?" he continued, his voice a mixture of frustration and bitterness. "The raven's curse isn't something to be feared, Oluwaseun. It's something to be controlled. I've spent my whole life watching and waiting for the right moment, and now it's here. You would destroy everything for your own ambition," Oluwaseun replied, their voice filled with an almost aching disbelief. "You've let power blind you. You're no better than the tyrants who came before us." Ifeanyi laughed, a sound that echoed unsettlingly through the trees. "Tyrants?" he said, shaking his head. "No, I'm a visionary. I'm the one who will reshape this kingdom, and I'll use whatever means necessary to do it." The weight of his words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. "You're wrong," Oluwaseun said, their voice firm and steady. "This kingdom will never be ruled by someone who's willing to destroy it to gain control." The two stood facing each other, a long moment of silence stretching between them, before Ifeanyi took one last step forward, his eyes cold and unfeeling. "Then you'll die trying to stop me," he said, his voice a whisper, as dark and final as the forest around them. The air seemed to hum with tension, as Oluwaseun and Ifeanyi stood in opposition, each preparing for what seemed inevitable. "I will not let you bring ruin to our people," Oluwaseun declared, their voice unwavering. The coldness in Ifeanyi's eyes didn't falter, but the corners of his lips curled into a smile that sent a shiver down their spine. "Then prepare to fight," he said simply. In a flash, Ifeanyi drew a sword, its dark blade gleaming with a malevolent energy, and charged at Oluwaseun. The sound of the blade slicing through the air filled the forest as Oluwaseun narrowly avoided the strike, their heart racing. The force of Ifeanyi's attack sent them stumbling backward, but they regained their footing quickly. "You've always been a step behind, Oluwaseun," Ifeanyi taunted, circling them like a predator. The battle between Oluwaseun and Ifeanyi raged on, the sound of clashing weapons reverberating through the forest. Sweat poured down Oluwaseun's brow as they struggled to keep up with their cousin's brutal assault. "Why are you doing this?" Oluwaseun asked through gritted teeth, their voice strained with exertion. Ifeanyi's eyes gleamed with ruthless determination. "You never understood, did you?" he sneered. "You've always been the righteous one, the idealist. But power doesn't come from righteousness. It comes from seizing it when it's within your grasp." "No," Oluwaseun retorted, their voice steady despite the battle. "True power comes from the strength of one's spirit, not from crushing others under your heel." Ifeanyi let out a laugh, his sword flashing as he lunged at them again. Ifeanyi without destroying everything they stood for? With one final desperate move, Oluwaseun drove their spear forward, narrowly avoiding Ifeanyi's sword. The impact sent a shockwave through their body, but the blow landed, striking Ifeanyi in the shoulder. He staggered back, his eyes wide with disbelief. "You!" he gasped, his voice filled with both anger and pain. "You can't defeat me. I'm the one destined to rule." Oluwaseun stood firm, their breathing heavy but steady. "You were never meant to rule," they said, their voice calm but filled with conviction. "You were meant to learn. You failed, Ifeanyi. And now, it's over." The forest fell silent as Ifeanyi stumbled, his sword falling from his grip. After the battle with Ifeanyi, Oluwaseun stood in the clearing, their chest heaving as they tried to regain their breath. The forest was still and silent, as if holding its breath, awaiting the next step of the journey. They knew that defeating their cousin was only the beginning. There were deeper forces at play, and the Raven Spirit's trials were far from over. "I have passed the first test," Oluwaseun thought to themselves, "but the real trial lies ahead." The path to the Raven's shrine was still far, winding through the dense forest that seemed endless. Every step felt like a pull, an invisible thread guiding them toward their fate. "I can't go back now," Oluwaseun whispered, their voice steady but full of sorrow. The weight of their lineage, their ancestors' mistakes, and the kingdom's future all rested on their shoulders. As Oluwaseun ventured deeper into the forest, the trees began to grow more twisted, their branches reaching out like gnarled fingers, as though they were trying to stop them. The air grew thicker, and the silence became almost oppressive. Then, in the distance, a soft, ethereal light appeared, glowing like a beacon in the darkness. "This must be it," Oluwaseun thought, their heart quickening with both anticipation and fear. They moved toward the light, feeling an overwhelming sense of peace mixed with unease. As they approached, the light intensified, and they found themselves standing before an ancient stone circle. The stones were worn with age, covered in moss, and etched with symbols they couldn't recognize. In the center of the circle stood a figure, a woman cloaked in white, her face obscured by a veil of flowing light. She did not speak, but her presence was commanding, her energy radiating with a quiet, powerful force. The figure raised a hand, and the ground beneath Oluwaseun seemed to ripple with energy. "You seek the raven," the figure's voice echoed, though her lips did not move. "But to break the curse you must first break yourself." The words struck Oluwaseun like a physical blow, and they felt the weight of their ancestors' mistakes pressing down on them. "What must I do?" they asked, their voice trembling despite their determination. The figure in white raised her hands, and the world around Oluwaseun seemed to dissolve into light. For a moment, there was only the sound of their breath, and then, a vision unfolded before them. They saw their ancestors, their faces both familiar and distant, standing in a great hall. The hall was filled with light, but there was a darkness hanging over it, a curse that could not be ignored. "This is where it began," Oluwaseun whispered, recognizing the place from ancient stories told by the elders. They watched as their forebears, rulers of the kingdom, made a pact with the Raven Spirit, one that promised power in exchange for the kingdom's soul. The vision shifted, and Oluwaseun saw their own face, young and innocent, being presented to the Raven Spirit by an ancestor. "This is your bloodline's curse," the figure in white said, her voice now calm yet filled with sorrow. "Your ancestors betrayed the Raven, and now, the bloodline must pay the price." Oluwaseun stepped forward, their heart heavy with the knowledge of the past. "How do I break it?" they asked. The figure's answer was simple and chilling. "You must choose to break the cycle. You must embrace the curse, and in doing so, free your people." The ground beneath Oluwaseun began to shake as the truth settled upon them. There would be no easy path. To break the curse, they would need to sacrifice a part of themselves. The vision faded, and Oluwaseun found themselves back in the stone circle, their knees trembling with the weight of what they had just seen. The air around them felt still, oppressive, as if the very earth was waiting for them to make a choice. "I must accept this," Oluwaseun thought, their mind racing. "I must break the curse, even if it costs me everything." The figure in white remained silent, her presence a constant reminder of the challenge ahead. "But will I survive it?" Oluwaseun whispered to themselves. The answer came, not in words, but in a deep, spiritual sense of understanding. They had no choice. "I cannot carry this burden forever," they thought. With a deep breath, Oluwaseun stepped forward, their heart heavy but resolute. "I will face the raven. I will free my people, even if it means breaking my own spirit." The ground beneath them rumbled once more, signaling the beginning of the final trial. There was no turning back now. Oluwaseun stood at the entrance of the Raven Spirit's shrine, the wind howling around them. The air was thick with magic, the very atmosphere charged with the raven's power. The path ahead was unclear, obscured by shadows that seemed to twist and move with a life of their own. "This is it," Oluwaseun thought, "the moment of truth." They stepped forward, their feet heavy as they moved deeper into the shrine. The walls were covered with carvings and symbols, each one more intricate than the last, depicting the history of their people and the Raven Spirit. "I have come to break the curse," Oluwaseun whispered, their voice echoing in the silence. The shadows around them seemed to shift in response. "But the price will be high." As they reached the center of the shrine, the Raven Spirit appeared, its dark form towering before them, its eyes glowing with an ancient light. The air was thick with power, and the raven spoke, its voice like a storm in the distance. "You have come far, Oluwaseun. But are you willing to sacrifice everything to break the chains of fate?" The question hung in the air, and Oluwaseun knew that their journey had reached its climax. The moment had arrived. The Raven Spirit loomed over Oluwaseun, its wings unfurled like a storm, casting shadows that seemed to stretch across the entire shrine. The air crackled with energy, and the earth beneath their feet trembled with the force of the spirit's presence. Oluwaseun stood their ground, their heart pounding with the knowledge that the fate of their kingdom and the world rested in their hands. "I will not be the pawn of destiny," they whispered to themselves. The raven's voice echoed through the shrine, filling the space with its ancient power. "You have come far, Oluwaseun, but your journey is not yet complete. You seek to break the chains of fate, but only by embracing your true self will you have the strength to succeed." Oluwaseun felt the weight of those words pressing down on them. The raven was testing them, pushing them to accept the full scope of their power and destiny. "What must I do?" Oluwaseun asked, their voice firm. The raven's eyes burned like embers. "You must fight for your people. You must confront the darkness within you and prove your worth." The ground shook again, and a dark figure appeared behind Oluwaseun, the embodiment of the curse, of the bloodline's betrayal. It was Ifeanyi, his body now corrupted and twisted by the power he had sought. "You cannot defeat me," Ifeanyi snarled, his voice distorted and filled with malice. "I am the shadow of your past, and you will never break free." The battle for destiny had begun, and there was no turning back. The clash of steel echoed through the shrine as Oluwaseun faced Ifeanyi, their spear meeting his corrupted blade with a resounding strike. The force of the impact sent shockwaves through the air, rattling the stone walls around them. "You have no idea what you're dealing with," Ifeanyi shouted, his voice full of rage and pain. "I've become something greater than you can ever imagine. The raven has chosen me." Oluwaseun gritted their teeth, the weight of their ancestors' mistakes bearing down on them. "You've given yourself to darkness, Ifeanyi. but you're not the raven. You're a slave to your own ambition." With every word, Oluwaseun pushed back harder, their spear flashing with each powerful strike. The raven spirit watched, its eyes glowing with an ancient understanding, as if it knew the outcome was not yet decided. "You will not win, Oluwaseun," Ifeanyi hissed, his body writhing with dark energy. "This is your destiny. You cannot escape it." Oluwaseun felt the weight of his words, but they knew that they had come too far to stop now. They would fight, not just for themselves, but for the kingdom, for their people, and for their ancestors. Oluwaseun could feel their strength waning, their body bruised and battered from the relentless assault. Ifeanyi was relentless, his dark energy overwhelming, but Oluwaseun refused to back down. Every strike Ifeanyi made seemed to be fueled by years of anger, jealousy, and the curse of their bloodline. "You cannot defeat me," Ifeanyi shouted again, his voice filled with fury. "I will rule, and the raven will serve me." The raven spirit's eyes flared with a deep ancient light, and Oluwaseun suddenly understood. The curse could only be broken by confronting the darkness within themselves, not just the darkness of Ifeanyi, but the shadow that had been passed down through generations. "I am not your shadow," Oluwaseun declared, stepping forward with renewed strength. "I am the future. The raven's curse ends with me." With that, Oluwaseun made the final strike, their spear piercing the heart of Ifeanyi, who staggered backward, his twisted form collapsing onto the cold stone floor. The raven spirit let out a low, mournful cry, and the air in the shrine grew still. The battle was over, but the weight of the victory felt almost too much to bear. As Ifeanyi's form dissolved into the shadows, Oluwaseun felt a deep emptiness within them. The curse had been broken, but the cost was immeasurable. The raven spirit's presence seemed to fade as well, its once immense power now diminished. Oluwaseun collapsed to their knees, exhaustion washing over them in waves. The shrine was silent now, the air still and heavy with the aftermath of the battle. "It is done," Oluwaseun whispered, their voice hoarse. But there was no sense of triumph, only a quiet sense of loss. The raven's curse has ended, but at what cost? The ground beneath them seemed to shift, and the figure of Adebayo appeared before them, his spirit, a silent witness to the journey's end. "You have done what none could do before you, Oluwaseun," Adebayo said, his voice calm and filled with pride. "You have freed the kingdom from its chains. But remember, true strength comes not from victory alone, but from the sacrifice made along the way." Oluwaseun looked up at the spirit of their mentor, the weight of their actions settling within them. They had broken the chains of fate, but the road ahead would require more than just strength. It would require wisdom and humility. The silence in the shrine was broken only by the distant sound of wind rustling through the trees outside. Oluwaseun stood, their body still sore from the battle, but their heart lighter than it had ever been. The curse was broken, the kingdom was free, but the journey had taken its toll. "I have done what needed to be done," Oluwaseun thought. "But my journey is not yet over." With the raven's curse lifted, the world outside the shrine felt different, quieter, more at peace. "Now," Oluwaseun said aloud, their voice steady, "I must return to my people. I must guide them into a new era." As they stepped out of the shrine and into the light of a new day, the weight of their ancestors' past seemed to lift, leaving only the future to shape. "This is my destiny," they thought, "and it will not be written in the blood of the fallen, but in the hearts of those I protect." The forest felt different as Oluwaseun stood on the edge of the sacred grounds. The curse was broken, but the cost was clearer than ever. "The price has been paid," they thought, their hand over their chest, feeling the weight of their sacrifice. The raven's spirit had faded, but it left behind something that could not be easily forgotten. They had lost a part of themselves, a part of their soul, bound forever to the kingdom's fate. But in return, they had freed the land, lifted the curse, and brought peace to their people. Yet, the feeling of emptiness lingered. What had they become? What had they truly lost? The land was healing, But Oluwaseun still felt disconnected, adrift between two worlds. As they walked through the village, they could see the joy in the people's faces, the smiles of those who had been freed from the curse. But inside, they carried an overwhelming sorrow. Can I ever truly heal? Oluwaseun wondered, staring at the joyful faces. They were no longer the same, and the path ahead seemed uncertain. What's left for me now? The realization hit. Oluwaseun had given everything to break the chains of fate. But was it enough? At the edge of the village, Oluwaseun met with Ifeoma, the elder who had always stood by them. The curse is lifted, but the price is not just mine to bear, Oluwaseun said softly, looking out over the village. The weight of the past still clings to me. Ifeoma smiled kindly, her weathered face filled with understanding. The spirit of the raven does not leave us, it changes us. You've given everything for your people, and in return, the kingdom will thrive. But you must learn to live with what you've become. The elder's words echoed in Oluwaseun's mind as they walked away, their heart heavy but understanding. As Oluwaseun prepared to leave the village, their final moments there were bittersweet. I have done what was asked of me, but who am I now, they thought. Their heart was filled with a longing for something more, but they knew that the future was uncertain. I must keep moving forward for my people, for my ancestors. The weight of the world seemed to lift, but their personal journey was far from over. The path ahead was theirs to carve, but they had learned that victory, while sweet, often came with a price. Oluwaseun walked into the unknown, their steps steady but uncertain. The weight of their bloodline no longer held them back, but they had learned that freedom came with its own set of challenges. I have broken the chains of fate, they thought. But what now? The world was vast, filled with possibilities, yet also with unknown dangers. Oluwaseun felt a deep sense of peace, but they also knew that they must continue the journey. For their people, for their ancestors, and for themselves. The world was open, and the next chapter awaited. The world outside the village had changed. The kingdom, once weighed down by the raven's curse, was now free, and with that freedom came a responsibility that Oluwaseun had never fully understood before. I have broken the chains, they thought, but now, I must build the future. The people looked to them for guidance, but in their heart, Oluwaseun knew the true work had only just begun. It was not enough to end the curse. They had to rebuild, to heal, to guide the kingdom through this new age. The weight of leadership was heavy, but for the first time, Oluwaseun felt ready to face it. The healing of the kingdom was not just physical, it was spiritual. The people had to learn to trust again, to embrace the future without fear of the past. Oluwaseun had to lead by example, showing them that true strength came from unity, from understanding their shared history and embracing their differences. Together we rebuild, Oluwaseun declared during a gathering, their voice strong and unwavering. Our future will not be defined by the chains of fate, but by the bonds we create today. The kingdom began to heal, slowly but surely, one step at a time. The peace that had settled over the kingdom was fragile, but with every passing day, Oluwaseun felt the bonds of trust strengthen. The kingdom's people, once divided by fear and darkness, now came together to rebuild. We have learned from the past, Oluwaseun thought, and together we will ensure the future is brighter. The path ahead was still uncertain, but Oluwaseun now understood what it meant to lead, not through power or fear, but through love and shared purpose. It was a lesson that would carry them forward into a new age. With time, the kingdom found balance, not in the absence of conflict, but in its ability to adapt and heal. Oluwaseun watched as the people grew stronger, more united, and more confident in their future. This is the future we've built, they thought, and it's a future of our making, not a legacy of chains. The work was far from finished, but for the first time, Oluwaseun felt truly at peace. They had broken the chains of fate, not just for their ancestors, but for the generations to come. As Oluwaseun stood overlooking the kingdom, they realized that their journey had come full circle. The curse had been broken, the kingdom restored, but the true test was still ahead, ensuring that the peace they had fought for endured. I have completed my task, Oluwaseun thought. But the journey of leadership never ends. They turned toward the horizon, ready to continue their path, knowing that they would always stand with their people, guiding them into a future of unity, strength, and hope.